Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sounding Board's LinkedIn Live. I'm Christine Tao. I'm your host. I'm also the co-founder and CEO at Sounding Board. We are a dynamic leader development platform that offers coaching and mentoring solution to enterprises. And today I have a special guest. It's Lauren Hutto, who's also my colleague and our head of leader transformation. And we're going to be talking about something a little bit different. Sounding Board just recently launched Accelerate, which is our coaching that's available to individual leaders. Previously, Sounding Board was only available to a company and organization. But we got so many people asking us, how can we get access to your coaching as well, that we opened up the platform so individuals could sign up. And what we learned about that was that there are still a lot of misconceptions, I think, around coaching and what it can do for you, how to select a coach, how to think about utilizing it, that we felt like it was worth half an hour for us to break it all down. So that's what we're here to do today, really demystify coaching, help answer your questions about how coaching can benefit you. And I have one of our best experts here with me, Lauren. So my very long-winded way of introducing you to share a little bit about yourself before we get started.
Yeah, super excited to be here and join and demystify, hopefully something that I think really benefits anybody in the world. So excited to dig into that a little bit. My name is Lauren Morley-Hutto. I'm our Vice President of Leader Transformation. What does that mean here? That really means that I support and help lead the team who's responsible for delivering all of our coaching, whether that's one-on-one or group coaching, as well as the team who supports the delivery and implementation of our software, where our dynamic leader development suite is inclusive of all of our technology, regardless of whether you use our coaches or not, to manage your leadership development programs in partnership with Sounding Board. So excited to join the conversation.
Awesome.
Oh, let me add what else of my background. Yeah. I've been a leadership and executive coach for 15 to 20 years now, and really have always been in the vein of helping people think differently about how they do their work. So we'll get into talking about coaching, but to me, at the heart of it is really being like a thought partner. Sometimes that feels voluntary for people. Sometimes it feels involuntary, even if they were voluntold or encouraged to engage in professional development. And so I love being able to work with and help other coaches really think about, how do we transform like the art of what it means to be a leader in the world today? So in a nutshell, in my background, that's really kind of at the heart of the work that I've done.
Well, I love that, because I think you bring up a point, which is there's an art to this. And
Yes.
I do find that sometimes it's that idea that sometimes gives people sort of confused ideas about what coaching is, especially I think coaching in the workplace or coaching to be a leader, which could be different than, things that I want for my personal life or for other areas of my life. And so I would love to start with having you break down for us a little bit, what is coaching? How is it different than other forms or support or engagement that I might get in a workplace? And then we can, go further from there.
Yeah. So, as I was thinking about this conversation, I'm like, what is the easiest? How do you how do you simplify this definition of coaching? And I think at the heart of coaching It's about having a thought partner. So here's what I mean by that. Coaching, especially leadership coaching, is a highly personalized, both personal and professional development experience that allows you to see yourself through somebody else's eyes, to hear yourself through somebody else's interpretation and experience of you, how you think about the world, how you show up in the world, but to bring a very action oriented, future focused point of view to how you're engaging in the work that you do every day. So, people always have used the metaphor like, oh, if you want to lose weight, you might hire a personal trainer or a nutritionist, right? Like those people are very much experts in their field, but what they're also doing is bringing you a perspective on, hey, what you're doing over here might really be working to help you get you where you want to go. And this thing, maybe not so much. You might want to try something different. So, yeah, exactly. So in the vein of as leaders, we are how we interact with other people. Like literally the choices we make, the way we think about things informs how people experience us as leaders. We're no longer in a position of just delivering and executing work. We actually have to motivate and influence people to deliver and execute work. So it really matters that we spend time reflecting on who we are, that we're aware of, our strengths, our challenges, and how we show up and interact with people to try to make a difference in our organizations.
And I think an important point that you make is your behaviors and how you show up day to day, which may be different than how we often think about expertise in our jobs naturally, right? I think
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
if
Good.
I'm running marketing, I know how to do something, I have that knowledge.
Yeah.
I'm just disseminating it or distributing that in some ways. But it may not be as tied to how I'm showing up, how I engage
Yes.
and interact with people in the way that you're talking about. Is that fair?
Yes. Actually, like what I love about that is the way you could think about it is as a leader, how you approach your job actually matters more than what you do in your job. And
Mm,
so a leadership coach or an executive coach helps you think about how you approach that. And how you approach your job is the way you think about the job, the way you see yourself or your opportunity to get work done or, have an impact in the organization. It's the way you talk. It's the way you communicate with or motivate other people to want to show up and do their job really well. It's the choices you make every day. It's the actions you take. And all of those things impact how people experience you.
yeah.
And how they experience you is going to determine how motivated they are to want to, go where you're trying to lead them in the way of what your organization or your team is trying to achieve.
So one more thought on this and we'll move on. But then why do what you're talking about feels very it's a partner,
Mhm.
accountability, helping you drive towards helping you achieve your goals and
Yep.
as a leader, right? And how
Yeah.
you lead and run your team. We often also hear from folks that it feels like, oh, it's my work therapist. And so tell me a little bit more about, are those two the same? Are they different? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Good point. I think the reason the what I make up about that is in our culture, especially in North American or U.S. culture, we associate the feeling of being really seen, heard, and understood by another person as being therapeutic,
Mm,
because that's the context in which we often socially can relate to what that feels like. So to me, coaching is absolutely therapeutic because it is so helpful to like see yourself through someone else's eyes and help you gain that self-awareness of like,
yeah.
am I having the impact I want to have? Am I showing up in the way that I think I am? How come people aren't experiencing me the way that they want? So it can feel really, really valuable to people, like deeply connected to their coach because they're being seen, that reflective process that happens in that partnership. What I would say is different, especially when you're thinking about leadership coaching, is we now actually have a lot of behavioral science out there. There are thousands of books produced every week, articles, resources that have science and psychology behind it to explain why certain ways of approaching leadership are more effective than others, right?
Mm,
Like that's basic, like human psychology and all sorts of like influencing forces and studies that are out there around how people interact and what's important about that. And
Right.
so, just like in a therapeutic setting where you're drawing upon research or certain modalities or approaches to that type of conversation, we're doing that in coaching too. But especially in a leadership coaching, we're orienting that towards that art of leadership, like I talked about earlier. And I think the other key difference is many therapists take an approach to be future oriented. It's much more evolved, I think, of a practice than in the past.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really helpful in a therapeutic setting to go backwards and understand, like, well, why did I end up acting like I do as a leader? What caused that or created that? In a coaching setting, we're really looking forward. It's action oriented. Like, once you have the awareness, what could you do differently? How could we be experimenting with helping you have a different impact?
And I think that at least my own experience and also seeing in a lot of the leaders that we've worked with, that nuance of being action oriented in future works really well for a work setting, just because
Yes.
we all know the pace of change that's happening in our teams, in our organizations, the constant pressure for results or for us to be able to find new ways to work. And so
Mhm.
that's certainly been my experience of why coaching uniquely has been so powerful in a corporate context
Yeah.
as folks are developing not only their own career, but how they're actually leading their teams because it's so immediately applicable, right? Like
Yes.
you take something from one session and you can immediately apply
Yeah.
that. And just like we like to do design sprints, you have your
Yes.
coaching, right? You can iterate and work through that before you meet again with your coach.
One thing I would add to that, I really like, and I think what's also really helpful and another way to kind of understand coaching is people will come in, and this is like the difference between a coach and a consultant. If you
Okay.
come to me and I'm your consultant and you're like, hey, I'm trying to, push forward this major change initiative or implement like business transformation. I got to get people on board. How do I do that? As a consultant, I'm going to go, oh, here's what I've done with 10 other organizations that they've found really effective. Here's a framework of how you think about. I'm going to tell you how to think about it. And I'm going to tell you what action is to your benefit. Doesn't mean I'm not going to co-create that with you, but for the most part, I'm bringing my expertise.
Yeah.
As a coach, you know yourself the best. You know your your organizational context better than I do. And here's the other most important thing. People today are leading organizations in industries in world markets that no one has experienced or seen before.
Yeah.
So I can give you I could consult and say, oh, here's how I think you should do it. Or I can help you learn how to think about how you should do it.
Yeah.
Because if I teach you and build that muscle of critical and strategic thinking, it almost doesn't matter what the next hurdle is. It doesn't matter what that next business transformation strategy is. If you've learned how to think about how you need to show up to convince other people to follow you in any type of change, and that you've gotten impact in how you've engaged with people to help them make that change, it doesn't matter what the change is. So you're building actually a muscle again for how you do your work that can be applied across a lot of different situations you face as a leader.
Yeah, it's the difference between, like, here's how you fish in exactly this pond
Yes.
versus,
Yes.
how do you do this so it can be applicable in many ponds, right? Teaching
Yes.
them to fish. And
Yes.
I think, you know, in a work context today, one of the biggest skills that we're hearing that organizations want out of their leaders is resilience and adaptability, which is
Yes.
exactly what you're talking about. How do you quickly adapt because
Mhm.
situations and environment and technology is changing so quickly, right?
Yeah.
And then how do you personally build the ability to constantly weather that change because we all know
Yes.
it's tiring, right? It's exhausting. It's a lot of work to have to think through, oh,
Yeah.
my environment's changed yet again, which I know a lot of us have.
Yes.
So, okay, so you've convinced me, Lauren. So great. I want to work with the coach. I can see what they can do for me, but how and when, where do I go? How do I pick a coach?
Oh,
How do I figure out who is the right coach for me?
yeah.
And how do I know if it's working?
Yeah. Oh, good question. So let me start with how you pick a coach. So I'd say maybe there's three key elements that you want to think about. One, it is natural human bias for us to likely pick a coach that's exactly like us. You think about like you go on a first date with somebody and you're like, I really like this person. It's probably because you have a lot in common, right? You
Yeah.
communicate similarly, like you jump in and kind of get going quickly. So you want enough likedness with your coach that you can develop a relationship quickly. Being
Mm.
able to see that person as like someone that you want to spend time with, who's going to be helpful for you, you see them as credible, that's really important. And I would say, and don't hire a coach that's exactly like you. When
Mm.
I hired my current coach, I hired her because she showed up in a way that I'm like, whoa, I want more of that. How do I do
Mm.
more of that? So I think finding somebody who has the capability to help you think differently and grow into whatever phase you want for yourself next is also really important. So can you see that person kind of standing on the other side, championing you and cheering you on to get you where you want to go because they might have some experience being there. And I don't mean just experience like business acumen or they've been in that role. Because while it's important for a leadership coach to be able to relate quickly to the type of functional work you do, the type of industry, like they need to have that same language. They need to understand enough about what is expected of you in your role. And yet, if people have done that exact same job and they've followed the same career trajectory as you are, they don't necessarily have a diversity of perspective always that helps you
Mhm.
think about what you're doing differently. So, too much similarity is really more kind of can get you into that trap of like, I'm training or being consulted on how I approach the work. You
Mm.
want the just right amount of variance while also finding somebody that you believe has the credibility to help you think and approach your work given what you're trying to achieve in that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
So close, but not too close.
Close, but not too close.
Okay.
And also assessing for that business acumen and
Yeah.
like their background, understanding that's important. But I think equally, if not more important, is what kind of leaders has this coach coached? Not
Mm.
just what is their professional background. Because you might have people who, I, for example, my professional background is more like in government and working with individuals and change management processes. And yet I've been really effective working with bioscientists, engineers. I don't have the same background as them, but what they're needing in their development as a leader is much more in the vein of where my leadership was actually my experience was built. And
Mm.
so that's the complement of what they're trying to achieve for themselves as an example.
Right. So maybe looking just a bit further beyond what have they done, but what do they have experience in developing in others, right? And does
Yes,
that match with some of the areas that you want to develop in? And I think there's
exactly.
ways to understand that both from looking at the clientele that they've worked with, as well as also um, even in the conversation, right? Because
Yeah.
you
Yep.
need enough of that context to feel like you're not explaining everything about your environment to them in your time
Yes.
together, but that they can quickly situate and understand the dynamics at play.
Exactly. And I would say last thing too is you want someone who can make you comfortably uncomfortable.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is it's comfortable because you're in rapport and relationship with them, you're willing to go there, but the whole purpose of coaching is to create growth. So if you're working with someone who's not really stretching the way that you think, challenging your point of view, helping you see yourself in a different light, you're probably not going to get a lot from that process. So if
Mm.
it feels too familiar, or like, hey, this is my best friend, I just want to hang out with them, or all they're doing is listening and not presenting back different ways of thinking and stretching you out of what the like view you can see today, then you're missing that element of the partnership that's really the thought partner, right? Like helping you gain different perspective, different mindset, shifting you out of what's comfortable, helping you see what is it about what you do today that's effective and what's not, and then how do you stretch yourself into that next level.
Okay, so my second question
Oh
had been,
yeah.
how do you know it's working? Could
Yes.
you share that, but also give us an example?
Yeah.
You talked about thought partnership, like help us anchor it in something that some of the folks might be actually experiencing so they can see how a coach could work with them and then maybe how then that leads them to understand if it.
Yeah. So I think one way to know that it's working is, to be honest, I might say something like, it's like you're surprised by what you're actually focused on, is how you know it's working. Because you're going to come in and you're going to say, like, I have a person, I might want to focus on these three things. Like, I've been given feedback that I think a little bit too tactically. I need to be more strategic, more like out in front of where the business is going. Okay, maybe let me start there. One goal.
I've gotten
And
that feedback in my prior life, so
and you've got
please.
that feedback. I mean, haven't we all? I mean, I think that's the only way you get to the next level is to go, oh, wait, I'm not thinking, broadly or strategically enough. And
Yeah.
then maybe the second, like a complementary goal is you then need to be able to set that type of vision for other people and get the team enrolled in moving in that direction out, way beyond what next week or the week after is about.
Yeah.
So let's say you come in and you have that awareness already. What I would hope and how you would know coaching is working in the first few sessions is that by reflecting your goals to your coach, they're going to go kind of like underneath that. And the way I think about that is like, if I was coaching you, Christine, and these were your goals, what's motivating you to want to make that change? What's the business impact you think you'll be able to have? What's the personal impact or personal type of fulfillment you're going to get from your work by being able to do it that way? And how do you hope to impact other people in that process? So you come in with this sense of a goal. I'm going to help you look underneath that. What's motivating you? And then most importantly, what do you need to do differently? Like, what is it about the way you've been thinking or organizing to your work that isn't getting you there? How do we help you become aware of that? And then honestly, like get untethered from that and be able and willing and motivated to experiment with thinking or doing things differently. It's going to be uncomfortable, but you need to feel motivated to want to do that. Right.
So getting to the motivation is important because you want to get people's sustained commitment around that.
Yeah.
Could you I'm going to poke you just a little
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's an example of how that might sound, or even
Mhm.
an example of how you might have done that, or you've seen our coaches at Sounding Board do that for others, and then what happened as a result of that?
Yeah, so I think about a leader that I've coached in the past who was functioning at a VP level in their organization, but to be honest, was really acting like a manager, like they're behaving like a manager.
Mm,
So they were still involved in like every single decision that was happening on their team. They still saw themselves as responsible for bringing their thinking and point of view into everything that was happening on their team. Then
mm,
what's hard is their team was a little bit like, well, where is my independence and room to make decisions and, drive forward something based on my perspective of what might work? And so
mm,
what was happening is like that person was functioning here. Well, their team needed to be functioning here and they needed to level themselves up. Well, what
mm,
I had to help this person realize is why does it make you feel so good to be able to contribute in that way? Oftentimes, why we
mm,
keep doing something is because we feel competent, we feel good. And you're asking me to now function here. Well, I don't even know what that looks like.
mm,
I don't know how to do that. So, part of why we naturally resist changing on our own without the support of a coach is because we often don't even know what it could look like to do something different. And we have to, as a coach, I have to help them see what they're trying to move towards, right? They might have a
mm.
sense of it, but they need to have like a real picture and then go, okay, now what's created this gap? Why have I not been motivated to get there? Well, sometimes I couldn't even see where they couldn't see where they were trying to go. Does that
Yeah.
help?
No, that I think it does also point to something very specific and unique about how Sounding Board approaches development with our leaders, because whether you call it motivation or the mindsets that are driving your behavior, just like we know that, when you're trying to lose weight, you could go to the gym and do the things that you need to
Yes.
do, but if you don't change your thinking about that, and you're thinking about health or what your goals are and understand those motivations, it becomes really easy to decide not to go to the gym today because
Right.
I'm
Right.
tired, right? And all of the things that cause us to get really motivated in January and forget we got a
Yes.
gym pass
Yeah.
in February, right? And
Yeah.
so I do think that that's the thing that a coach not only can help you uncover, but that it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to do that day in, day out. We get stresses at work. There's things that happen. They're also, I've found my coach has been really great at helping me drive some accountability and
Yes.
helping to bring me back onto that path that both of us have
Yes.
articulated when the going gets tough.
Mhm.
Once they've helped me understand what are some of those things getting in my way.
Well, I think you hit on, like, again, how do you get the most out of working with a coach and like what's it like to be in coaching? It's a reflective process. The focus is on you and it's on how you think, what choices you make, what actions you take. And because it's action oriented, the goal is to help you become aware of what you can't see. What are your blind spots in how you approach the work? And what impact does that have? And does that line up with how you want people to experience you or not? And
Yeah.
then once you kind of, to be honest, once that dissonance is created, like, wow, that's not how I want to be experienced, or I do really want to be experienced this way, and I need to do something different. So people, are motivated to want to work for me or, work with me as a leader in an organization. And then it's like, it's great to have that revelation and that insight. But that without any accountability is just like nice thinking. It
Yeah.
doesn't actually change anything. So it's like I might have envisioned the, body shape I want to have, but if I'm not going to the gym, nothing's going to change. If I don't change how I eat, nothing's going to change. So the accountability, and this is really where behavioral science comes in. Like, I mean, there's behavioral science. If you tell someone your goal, merely telling them, like, I want to do this, you've
Yeah.
now spoken that out to somebody else. You're now accountable. Like that person knows what you're trying to achieve. So add in a coach who you not only are shaping what you're trying to develop in, but also you're going to have to come back next week and go, did you do that thing or did you not? And what did you learn from it? And if
Yeah.
you didn't do it, why not?
Yeah.
Like, what was keeping you from wanting to make that change? So, that accountability partner is like the critical aspect of coaching, that I think creates the most value and the quickest turnaround for impact as compared to you trying to work on your own to achieve those goals.
And the reality is, as human beings, we all have blind spots, right? And what I found often with my coach was I'd tell her in a session that, hey, this is the thing I really want to happen. And then, 2, 3 sessions later, she'd remind me of that and say, and here's some things I'm noticing or observing
Yes.
that you're doing that don't seem to be in service of that goal. So,
Hmm.
like, let's understand why that's happening. And
Yeah.
I think that goes back to your very, very first point, which is some surprise, right?
Yeah.
I then get surprised that, oh, now we're starting to talk about something I didn't expect to talk about, but really is helping me unblock some of these things that are getting in my way of being effective and
Yeah.
being the leader that I want to be and could be holding me back from my next promotion
Yep.
or why, peers or others that I think might be at the same level as me are being recognized or acknowledged when we're doing
Yeah.
similar work, right? And
Yeah.
those are the nuances I think that, as we wrap today, is that art of leadership that is challenging to navigate, particularly as you're going further and further up in an organization, because presumably we've all built a level of expertise by the time we get
Mhm.
to that level. So, what ends up being what distinguishes a successful leader of a function versus another? It's probably less and less your knowledge, especially
Yes.
with technology today, but it's
Mhm.
how are you getting things done?
Yeah, absolutely. And the higher level you go as a leader, the less likely you're going to get real, honest feedback from people.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so the only way to be an effective leader is to build a process of self reflection that allows you to get real honest with yourself, get an outside perspective from others, whether that's a coach, whether that's a mentor, whether that's other senior leaders in your organization. I would say that should be all of the above.
Yeah.
You're getting the perspective that helps you go, am I being as effective as I can be in what I'm trying to achieve? Ultimately, that's what it's about. We can't do that on our own. We just
Yeah.
can't. We're not wired that way, you know?
And it certainly makes the journey, I think, at least for me, my experience is it makes the journey also a lot more fulfilling and
Yeah.
I feel so much more supported knowing I've got somebody else there to help me with a lot of the really real
Absolutely.
challenges we're facing as leaders.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Lauren, we
That's
are
so
done.
bad.
That was our half hour. I feel like we've learned a ton about what coaching can do. Just wanted to remind folks you can also get access to this type of an experience through Accelerate, which is our self serve experience into coaching. And I think Lauren's given you a taste of that today. But what we've seen is for folks, this journey can take them so many places. We've had
Mhm.
leaders even become coaches themselves as a result of going through the experience. Certainly, I went and started a company because I had such a transformative experience with coaching. And so maybe we'll just leave folks with that, which is, wishing you the most in your own journey of becoming a
Yeah,
leader. And certainly, if we can be helpful in any way, we'd love to be able to support that.
absolutely. Thanks,
Okay,
everybody.
Lauren, thanks for joining.
Yeah.
Bye.